Anyway, I'm Meryl, as Sam said, Managing Director of the BA. I was delighted to be asked to come along and talk to you about bookselling. It's hard to know where to start and finish on the subject of bookselling at the moment. So what I've decided to do is cover all bases with my title. So crisis management is something we've gotten very used to, all of us, over the course of COVID. The BA's role in all of this really is to create a sustainable bookselling environment. I feel very much that now, particularly that we've come through the pandemic to some extent, that we're about, our job is to create a future for bookselling. And also just to talk a little bit about the halo effect of bookshops. We've done a bit of research last year, which we've shared previously with Booksellers Research Network. So anyway, I'm just going to crack on through that. I'm going to do a little bit of history, a little bit of current stuff, a little bit of COVID impact, and then a little bit about what the BA does. So hopefully that will be interesting. You can stop me at any point and ask questions if you would like to. Obviously, the world's changed. I don't think any of us would have assumed that we were going to be facing a war in mainland Europe or a global pandemic even 5 years ago. It would have been unimaginable for us to think about that. I think I sat next to Tim at lunch actually just now, and I was very pleased recently to see Australia divert itself from its rightward trajectory and join the liberal democracies of the world in going back into the right direction. But not so much here. I think we're just not sure what we're dealing with. I think we've got a big job in our hands with the new government. I mean, it's good that we'll have a bit of stability in government and we'll know what we'll be dealing with, but we have an enormous hill to climb with the crisis that is facing us. I just thought it might be worth dwelling on some of the challenges and some of the changes really that have happened since 2019. So this is pre-COVID. This is the world as it used to be. Things that have happened since 2019. It's quite extraordinary when you write a list of them. So we've survived 4 at least retail lockdowns, depending on which country in the UK you were in. Switchback of government regulations. Brexit, of course, combined with COVID, absolutely horrifying, particularly for our Irish members. We've got 10% of our members are in Ireland, so that's, it's very significant. It's been horrifying for them, particularly in the early months. It's getting better now. Waterstones bought Blackwells. I don't think anyone would have seen that one coming. Easton in Ireland bought Dubray, which was a big shift in the Irish market. Amazingly, independent bookshop numbers are the highest they've been for 9 years. More on that later. Bertram's went into administration, which gave us some opportunities to get more involved in member support. Garner's bought a warehouse in Norwich and opened a warehouse in France. That was partly because of Brexit. Bookshop.org entered the UK market, having launched in the US in January. And there have been consumer behaviour shifts, the like of which we would never have been able to anticipate. BookTok, who knows how that works? I don't know how BookTok works, but it's certainly selling lots of books. And I think one of the things that's happened is that booksellers have been understood what they represent and what they contribute to the high street and to the community and to the country and culture is well understood. And I'd like to think that we've been part of that process, and we've got our report to prove the point. So why am I qualified to talk about all this? We have been around, shall I let Dr. Caroline Wintersgilly? Oh, she's done it. I don't know who she is, but I'm sure she's extremely eminent. We've been around a while. We were established in 1895. So we celebrated, or rather we didn't celebrate. We never got to celebrate our 125th birthday in 2020 because COVID. Our remit is to promote, serve, represent and support booksellers of all sizes in the UK and Ireland. And as I said, we advocate for bookselling, and the aim now is to create a sustainable bookselling environment and to make sure that booksellers themselves are sustainable, more of which later. We have about 4,500 outlets in membership. That includes every branch of every member. Brilliantly, we've got 1,050 independents now. In 2017, the low point was 867. So that's an incredible uptick. I have views on how sustainable that might be. I hope it's extremely sustainable, but there will be members who might struggle to cope with the coming onslaught. Our members cover indies, chains, wholesalers, institutional suppliers, and some online, not Amazon, importantly, which has allowed us to be very vocal on the subject. In fact, I've got a meeting at 2:30 and at 3:30 every hour. And our bookshops are in England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland. So we have, for the first time in our history, an all-female cast. Our president and vice presidents are all women, and if you count me, that's 4. 2 of us are Scottish, so what's not to like about any of that? And our BA council, our advisory council, we try to make sure that it's incredibly representative of the industry. We have reps on there from W. Smith, Waterstones, a lot of independents, gardeners, wholesalers. It's incredibly collegiate. And we try to, well, we do grapple with a lot of the trade issues. Anyone who's involved in any trade body will know how that works. We try to punch above our weight nationally and internationally. We're active members of the European and International Booksellers Federation, and we're delighted that we're involved in, they have secured funding from the EU to bring booksellers together globally over the course of the next 3 years. They've got quite a lot of money to do that. They're going to run an international booksellers conference in Prague next March. They're doing a bookseller exchange program. We've got another Australian bookseller actually coming over, and lots of people from all over Europe coming to our conference next week. And we become involved in anywhere where bookselling needs to be represented, and we're very proud of the range of activity that we do. Like any trade organisation, we have a range of member services. These are top line ways of describing them. Our commercial services include Batch, which is a supply chain company, and an EPOS system. And we also own the National Book Token Scheme, which has been around for 90 years this year. So that's a wonderful landmark for us. We represent, we run events, we bring booksellers together, we try and resource booksellers as much as possible. And we increasingly over the last decade, we've started to campaign directly to consumers about how important bookshops are. And that's been very fruitful for us and very appreciated by our membership. So we'll carry on doing that. These are just some of the examples of the things that we do. Some of this is public facing, some of it's trade facing. We run a campaign at Christmas time, we've got shopping, early shopping local. We run a parliamentary book awards, and we try and do equivalent activity all the time in Ireland as that we do in the UK. Independent Bookshop Week and Bookshop Day are sort of bookends where we celebrate bookshops on high streets. We also, over the last few years, have become very engaged in progressive agenda items. So we want to make sure that booksellers are, I mean, many booksellers already are concerned about being sustainable in an environmental sense. We're trying to expand the definition of sustainability beyond the environmental work to become about legacy and longevity. And we also have set up an equality and inclusion action group to look at diversity and inclusion. So we're making fairly good strides in those areas. COVID blew it all, of course, because we started all this in 2018, and then, goodness me. Anyway, we've got back to it recently. So we're about to launch a carbon calculator, for instance, at the conference next week, and a sustainable bookselling manifesto. We've also, this was something else that was blown, of course, by COVID. We have this year launched our BA Learning Skills Hub. So we're trying to make sure that we've got resources and skills potential for bookshops in one place. So we've been working with the Independent Publishers Guild to produce this, and we spent a lot of this year gathering content, repurposing what we already had and creating new content. So we're hoping that we will be able to share that across other trade associations and other booksellers associations too. These are some of the guides that we've created or repurposed, and we're working in new formats as well. So we've created podcasts, video tutorials. So we're trying all the time to bring bookseller expertise together, so they're sharing their own experiences with each other, but also, you know, making sure that we've got experts. And we didn't have a learning function for over 20 years. So it's a big moment, and it's for the long term. You know, we're very invested in it. As a lot of your academics and interested in history of the book selling world, I thought I would just briefly touch on the history of book tokens, because Sam's all excited. Book tokens are 90 years old, and I think that's incredible, actually. And it's been an incredible powerhouse for us, because it's been able to invest money and then invest money to make money, and then invest money in the creation, for instance, of World Book Day. We've been able to support trade initiatives. And National Book Tokens started in 1932. I know Sam and your students, Maria, you know all about the history of this scheme. It was designed to keep the value in the industry, and it's really worked. You know, it's really worked. And it does generate incremental sales. So bookshops get the benefit of selling and redeeming the token. We moved over to electronic gift cards in 2010. It was incredibly controversial when we did it. Booksellers were very unhappy. They did not want to move to electronic gift cards, as we called them then. But it's so much better now because there's an instant financial reckoning. People can see what they've sold and what they've redeemed. Much better for us. It's much better for the booksellers. But we've been through, we started with lick and stick vouchers, and then we moved to paper vouchers, and now we are a fully fledged e-gift card. This data is actually pre-COVID, but I just thought it was quite interesting to see what happens when people buy and sell book tokens. It drives people into bookshops, and it makes people spend more than the value of the token once they're in the shop. So it's really powerful. We're very, very lucky because it's been going for so long. It's quite hard to start one from scratch. Lots of countries have tried, and I think in Australia they're trying to reinvent yours at the moment. But given that it's 90 years old and we've built up a lot of heritage and legacy and funds, it's been incredibly important to certainly to our ability to deliver what the association can do to its members. And the most recent development was to introduce a personalisation option so people can personalise their own gift. So that's a brief count through National Book Tokens. BATCH stands for Booksellers Automated Transaction Clearinghouse. It's thrilling. It's a supply chain provider. Improvement system. You could pay your bills, you can do your returns, and now that we were able to buy Bartline out of Bertram's when it went into administration, these are the companies, some of the companies that use BATCH, the publishers that use BATCH. It's bookended by publishers and booksellers, and it makes booksellers' lives much easier, and it makes publishers' lives better in payment terms because they get one payment from BATCH. BATCHline is our EPOS system, and because we were able to buy that at Bertram's, and we've invested for the last 2 years in improving that infrastructure and customer service, it's become a really integral part of what we offer our members as well. We also have launched BATCH in the US, which has been, again, slightly painful because COVID has blown that off course, but the US industry is very manual. And certainly the banking system is very antiquated compared to the European systems. So it's been slightly slow to take off, but we're getting there. I thought at this point, I'd talk a little bit more about the historical perspective of bookselling. And I was thinking about how often and how comprehensively it's been disrupted over the years, and how many times we've all felt that it's been done for. And it never has been done for. So I think I'm now at the point where I'm thinking, okay, we're just going to weather the next storm. There may be fewer of us and maybe more of us, we don't know. And these are just recent disruptions, really. But the Netbook Agreement went in 1995, 6, 7. That meant that, publishers setting the price, booksellers were able to discount, and people rushed in to do that. The supermarkets started to sell books. Amazon then started its rise, of course, at the same time. Those things were coincidental and causal. Out-of-town shopping developments and poor time planning in the 90s meant that you had an influx of superstores actually into the industry. So you had, and that they turned out to be unsustainable. The Border Superstore, Waterstones went in for superstores. It was a moment, and I think at the time we didn't realise it was somewhat of a golden age because there were so many bookshops, but it didn't turn out to be sustainable. The introduction of business rates in 1990, I mean, that's a very dry thing to put up on a list on a slide, but it's been pretty catastrophic for high street retail and certainly for high street booksellers. And we still now are lobbying the government every day of my life. The words business rates come out of my mouth. They need fundamental review. The rise of discounters, the entry of Amazon, and then the rise and dominance of Amazon is, we all know what that looks like. I think now, certainly through COVID, there's been a consumer shift. People want to do something different. Some consumers want to behave differently. Ebooks and the digital revolution. Ebook sales through high street bookshops have gone. I mean, it's not a thing anymore. And the same thing is broadly happening with audio. Audible is almost entirely dominant in audio. We're trying to pull back some of that market share for conventional bookshops at the moment. And then we had high street decline and retail pressures before COVID, and then Brexit and COVID came in, one very quickly after the other. So booksellers had to, and that includes Waterstones and W. Smith to some extent, and certainly the independents, had to rush online. They had to become online booksellers almost overnight, and that happened all around the world to every retail sector. But I'm really proud of what Booksellers were able to do. Bookshop.org arrived. We facilitated their arrival into the UK. It was controversial at the time, but 515 booksellers are now on that platform, which is built for the benefit of independent bricks and mortar booksellers. So they've done a great thing, and that meant that a lot of booksellers could then be viably online. They didn't have to build their own website, although most people use both, which is great because it gives them options. And now, of course, we've got the cost crisis and almost certain recession. So that's all a joy. We thought we were through, and now you look up. Anyway, the effect of that disruption up to 2019, that graph goes back to 1996, so that's just when the netbook agreement went. You can see what was happening to the number of independent bookshops, starting to flatten. And for that whole period, I've worked at the VA a long time, we had no idea where we were on that curve. And we just kept going down. And I mean, we didn't know what we were dealing with, but now it's shifted. So our strategy for countering that disruption was to invest in our consumer campaigns, talk directly to consumers about how important bookshops are, counter Amazon very vocally. So we do that in every way we can. I've been in front of select committee. That's a bit self-referential to have a photograph of myself up there, but that was a select committee in Parliament, and I was one of 3 people. So it was Boots, John Lewis, and the BA. And they wanted us to represent the independent sector. So, I mean, you have to take those opportunities. So we lobby government a lot, we lobby the trade, and we strengthen and amplify the sector wherever we can. And we really we set out to change the narrative about bookshops being doomed. We didn't want people to talk like that. There were still hundreds of booksellers, and there are not hundreds of record stores. There may be hundreds of delis, but, bookselling was a little bit different. So we wanted to equip bookselling to survive system shock through COVID, and now certainly feel like we want to invest in creating a future for bookselling. So our priorities up to 2020 were, what you would expect them to be. We'd embarked on our progressive agenda items, and we wanted to make sure that the high street was vigorous, and that we were having our members collaborate across high streets. Wanted a level playing field, so we wanted to say to the government, don't allow Amazon to be egregious, and we wanted to prepare our members for Brexit and post-Brexit. Community activism and placemaking were terms that were starting to come into play. But then, look, COVID, and it changed everything. So the landscape we were dealing with over the last, up until very recently, was affected by all these things. There was a real worry and divergence of experience across the industry through COVID. It made it really clear, I think, between different types of people that worked in the industry, what was required of them. So you had very junior people working at their kitchen table. You had senior CEOs of publishing companies with a tennis court in the back of their Zoom calls. And it was very hard to manage that. But I think the BA pulled its membership together, and the members are already very close-knit, so that we were able to create what turned out to be a very positive narrative for bookselling through that. One thing that has happened is that campus booksellers have been very badly affected, and to a large extent no longer exist. So that was already underway, wasn't it? I mean, it was, and now Blackwell's belongs to Waterstones. John Smith still continues, and it is a viable bookseller. But anyway, we had, and we also had to cope, or booksellers had to cope with their Christmases, which is obviously a crucial selling period, being compromised by lockdowns last year and the year before. All that. What we did was to pull people together online. We reinvented what we did and how we provided it to members. So we took to social media, we took online, and we went out very vocally to the industry and to the government to talk about the importance of bookshops. We also put some money where our mouths were, I hope, and we put £160,000 towards COVID grants, which we paid out to our members in the early part of last year in 2021. The idea being we needed to get the bookshops to survive to Christmas 2021, and to a large extent that worked, and of course was very well received by bookseller members of the BA. So that was pleasing to be able to do that. And as I've said already, the COVID impacts are not what we would have expected them to be. We've got more bookshops now than we've had since 2012. Book sales are still booming. I mean, I got the TCM figures through this morning, and I think the book sales are up on 2019. They're up 20% on 2019 this morning. It's incredible. Some of that's going to Amazon, obviously. We can't tell through the TCM figures from Nielsen. which proportion, but anyway, the independent sector is rallied. Waterstones is in very safe hands and growing, and Smiths too seems to be established, steady in. Our membership numbers I've mentioned a few times are, so these green arrows obviously are good because some months they're red and they're pointing downwards, but not recently. So we have 1,053 independents in membership of the BA. You can see that's year on year there. So that's extremely pleasing. That's all businesses. So you'll see that graph, which was coming down, the previous one I showed you, and that's what you can see that because of the, but the top line there is indie businesses. So we're very happy about that. As I said, I have some concerns about how sustainable those booksellers might be, because they have to survive what's coming at them, and a lot of them are very new and they may be opened for a variety of reasons. What we did in early part of this year was to go out and ask our members what were their concerns, because we need to know what our priorities are. So we asked them to talk about the cost of doing business. The most striking number on this list here is the one that tells us that 7 out of 10 bookshops reported that they'd either put plans to either invest or open a new shop on hold. And that really worried me, because I felt like that's a break on investment, on that number of bookshops continuing to go up. And it betokens a nervousness about how people are going to navigate the future. So we obviously have to take heed of that, and that will affect how we lobby the government. The energy crisis, again, it's a bit self-referential. It's a quote I gave the bookseller last week, but I do tend to believe that the impact of the energy crisis on independent bookshops particularly is more vivid and more immediate than COVID, because it could put people out of business overnight. There's a lot of people's energy bills have gone up. We know this narrative, by 400%. And if they're a small business on 4% margin, which a lot of bookshops are, they're not going to survive that. We want to make sure that they will survive. To illustrate the point about how fractional profits are in bookselling, I just thought I'd show you a few slides on what this is a benchmarking. It's called Baseline. It's a benchmarking project that we run once a year. So you'll see there that the average turnover for an independent, this is a small sample size because COVID diminished the number of people who were participating in the benchmark, and we're hoping to get it back up. The average turnover for an independent is £270,000. It's not a lot of money. You'll see that you can see different splits there. Turnover there for a large independent, the turnover average is at the high end is 488,000. Sales breakdown, no surprise there. Books still represent 65% nearly of all things sold in a bookshop, but the 11% of them have a cafe. That has an impact now, because if they're running refrigeration and cooking facilities, the energy will hit them harder. And bookshops have always sold other goods, so you can see that laid out there. And there's the kicker, the net margin, and that's in a year where they were taking COVID grants and furloughing staff, is 5%. So you're never going to make £1 million being a bookseller. So what does a sustainable bookshop look like? Because we're in the business of making sure they're sustainable and the ecosystem's sustainable. This is sort of so far so obvious, but this is what we want to ensure that all booksellers is economically viable. They have to make sure that their business plan is fit for purpose and they're running their business properly and viably, financially aware and astute, professional and skilled. That's why we've set up BA Learning. They are already extremely collegiate and collaborative with each other. They're a wonderful group of people to hang out with. I feel very lucky to get to do that every day. They always have been and continue to be socially responsible. There's a lot of conversation around payment of the minimum wage by bookshops. They want to do the right thing. It's not easy in a market where they can't put their prices up and to flex on their costs, and their margins are small, but they continue to behave very well in that way. They're culturally impactful, and I think that's about, when Evan talked about what I should talk to you about building community, you want bookshops to be part of your community. Lots of communities are very proud of the fact that they've got bookshops there. And they're already often very environmentally active. We've got lots of members who are extremely aware of their sustainability and are also politically engaged. And I don't necessarily mean party politically, I mean just in their local politics. They are very engaged and able to influence above and beyond what they do themselves. So I think they punch above their weight. And I think increasingly through COVID, we saw booksellers being the providers of mental well-being and good mental health. And I think that's incredibly important as we seek to rebuild after those ravages. And we want booksellers to influence our supply chain too. So that's what sustainable bookshops look like. They look like every bookshop in Britain and Ireland. And the point of sustainability, of course, is to we want for our bookshops to be able to do what we do, which is to demonstrate their relevance to their communities, like we do to the government. We want to attract more people to shop in bookshops. We want to change the conversation about retail, because a lot of government and a lot of the media think retail is dead and it's all moved online. That's a very complicated picture, and that's not the whole story. And we want to make sure that we're amplifying the collective voice of booksellers so that they can talk with confidence and conviction about what they do and how much they matter. To which point, we were very pleased and proud to work with the Institute of Place Management last year at Manchester Met University, and they produced for us a report, Booksellers as Placemakers. I've got, I think, 4 copies. They're quite heavy, so I only got 4 with me. But they put some numbers on what we already knew, which was that bookshops in their communities, you know, they outperform their fellow retailers. They create incredibly important things for those communities. And at the same time, hidden under the photograph there, we did an economic impact report in Ireland to demonstrate the same thing in the Irish public for the importance of bookshops there. These are some of the social media assets that we've created. I've said this every time I've presented a slide like this. These numbers are implausibly big. I mean, but this is what they found, is that bookshops are making 100% of booksellers are significantly contributing to the diversity of their high street. That's now a fact that we can cite. So that's very, very pleasing. 98% of bookshops contribute to police marketing of their times. So those are incredibly important things that bookshops do. I know you're all very interested in how that works. And what we are doing with that data is now using it to talk to government and the trade about how important bookshops are. I am repeating myself, but it's incredibly important. What we want to see out of this is a high street environment which the government supports. We want to see suppliers understanding how important bookshops are and investing and supporting them. And we want to see bookshops at the heart of the post-pandemic recovery, because I think we all believe books matter and therefore bookshops matter, and we want to see them vibrant and active. We want to also see booksellers from new communities. We're trying very hard to make a very warm welcome for people from different communities and maybe underrepresented communities into bookselling. And we want to see booksellers taking the lead on diversity and on sustainability. And more than anything, I think I've said this several times, what we want is a secure future for bookshops. We're in a room full of friends here. I hope you all agree that that's a good aim for us, and it's certainly what we're all about. So I hope that's been interesting in some way, giving you a bit of a flavour and set the scene for what we might talk about next. Thank you very much.